I learned what real fear is the day I fought beside humanity, Part 3. The siege. They did not reach the hollow node. Not that day. The tunnels were filled with creatures. Too many creatures. They fought for every step, and still they were pushed back. After 2 more hours, Telos made the decision to retreat. They needed shelter. They needed rest. They needed to survive the night. They found an old refinery on the edge of the colony. It was made of thick metal walls and had only a few entrances. Good for defense. By the time they arrived, 6 more Varani soldiers had found them. Combined with the 4 humans, they had a force of 11. 11 soldiers against an entire planet of hollow dot. The odds were not good. We hold here until extraction, Telos commanded. 12 hours. 12 hours. It sounded simple. It was not. They built barriers from broken machines and metal plates. They set up firing positions at every entrance. They counted their ammunition and found it lacking. The Varani soldiers worked in silence, efficient and focused. The humans worked differently. They talked. They joked. Even now, even here, Tai Wang was telling some story about his younger brother that made Jisoo laugh. Telos watched them. He still found their behavior strange. But he noticed something else too. The Varani soldiers were calm, yes, controlled, but there was a tension in them, a coldness. They were prepared to die. The humans were also prepared to die, but they were not cold. They were warm. They were alive. Even facing death, they refused to let go of life. Night fell. The darkness outside became complete. The hum of the hollow grew louder. Then the attacks began. They came in waves. First, small creatures, scouts, testing the defenses. Telos' soldiers cut them down easily. Then bigger creatures. Stronger, faster. The barriers shook under their weight. By the 3rd hour, they had lost 2 Varani soldiers. By the 5th hour, another. The ammunition was running low. The creatures kept coming. During a brief pause in the attacks, Telos found Do-Hyun at the eastern wall. The big human was reloading his weapon. His shoulder was wrapped in bloody bandages. A wound from earlier that Telos had not noticed. You should rest, Telos said. Let another soldier take your position. Do-Hyun shook his head. No, your injury will slow your reactions. You are a liability. The human looked up at him. His eyes were tired but steady. The others are counting on me. I stay. That is not logical. A wounded soldier is less effective. You should, Commander. Do-Hyun's voice was quiet but firm. I know I'm hurt. I know I'm tired. But if I leave this wall, and someone else dies because I was not here, I could not live with that. So I stay. Telos stared at him. You would risk your life for something as small as guilt? It is not small to me. The attacks resumed before Telos could respond. More creatures, more death. The eastern wall was hit hardest. 3 creatures broke through at once, tearing through the barrier like paper. Do-Hyun stood his ground. His heavy weapon roared again and again. He killed 2 creatures. The 3rd reached him. Its claws raked across his chest. He fell. Telos thought he was dead. Then Do-Hyun stood up. Blood poured from his wounds. He could barely hold his weapon, but he stood up. He lifted his gun with shaking arms and fired point blank into the creature's head. It collapsed. Do-Hyun collapsed beside it. Jisoo rushed forward, already pulling supplies from her bag. You fool, she said. But there was no anger in her voice. Only fear. Only love. You absolute fool. Do-Hyun smiled weakly. Could not let it through. The others are fine because of you. Jisoo was working fast, trying to stop the bleeding. Now shut up and let me save your life. Telos watched this. A wounded man, nearly dead, smiling because he had protected his friends. A medic, exhausted. Beyond words, fighting to save him not because of duty, but because of love. This was not how Varani behaved. Varani accepted losses. Varani calculated. Varani did not throw themselves into death for individual soldiers, but humans did. Humans could not seem to help it. The 8th hour was the worst. The Hollow mounted their largest attack. Dozens of creatures. They hit every entrance at once. The barriers fell. The refinery was breached. Telos ordered a retreat to the inner compound. Standard doctrine. Fall back. Consolidate. Survive. Yuna ignored him. No, she said. We push them back. That is suicide. We cannot. We can. She was already moving, not away from the breach, but toward it. Follow me. She should not have survived. 5 humans and 1 wounded Varani against a tide of monsters. It was impossible. The numbers said they would die in seconds. But numbers did not account for humans. Yuna led the charge. She moved like water, flowing between creatures, firing with deadly precision. Taiwan followed her, his earlier fear replaced by something fierce and bright. Jisoo was there too, shooting, with one hand and dragging wounded soldiers with the other. They pushed into the breach. They pushed into the monsters. They pushed forward when every instinct said to run, and the Hollow faltered. Telos had seen it before, in rare moments. The Hollow were a hive mind. They thought together, planned together, but they were also predictable. They expected prey to run. They expected fear. They expected logic. Humans were not logical. The charge bought time, precious seconds. Telos used them to reinforce the wall, to seal the breach, to stabilize the defense. By the time Yuna's squad fell back, the eastern wall was holding again. Yuna was covered in blood. Most of it was not hers. She was breathing hard, her rifle empty, her knife in her hand. She had been fighting hand to hand at the end. Telos approached her. That was reckless. You should have retreated. Yuna met his eyes. Retreat where? There was nowhere to go. The only way out was through. You could have died. Yes. She wiped blood from her face. But I did not. And if you had? Yuna was quiet for a moment. Then she said, then at least I would have died fighting. Not hiding, not waiting. Fighting. She looked at her squad. At Taiwan, shaking but alive. At Jisoo, still working on Doyen. At the walls, still standing. We do not surrender, she said quietly. We do not accept defeat. We fight until we cannot fight anymore. And then we fight a little longer. Telos looked at her. This small, soft creature who had just charged into certain death and survived. This human who did not know when to quit. You are insane, he said. Yuna smiled. It was a tired smile, but real. So we have been told. 4 more hours until extraction. 4 more hours of darkness and monsters and blood. Telos did not know if they would survive, but standing beside these humans, he found himself believing they might. I learned what real fear is the day I fought beside humanity. Part 1. The Alliance forms, Telos, had served the Galactic Coalition for 40 cycles. He had fought in 12 wars. He had watched planets burn and species fall. He had buried more soldiers than he could count. In all that time, he believed he understood everything about war. He believed he understood courage and fear and death. He was wrong. The Varani were tall creatures. They stood nearly 3 meters high, with 4 arms and hard shells covering their bodies. Their eyes could see in darkness. Their minds could calculate battle odds in seconds. They were born for war, raised for discipline, trained to think without emotion. Telos was one of their best commanders. His record was perfect. His loyalty was absolute. When the Coalition asked him to lead a joint strike force against the Hollow, he accepted without question. The Hollow were the enemy of all living things. They were not a species. They were a hunger, a darkness that moved between stars and consumed everything it touched. When the Hollow took a world, they did not simply kill. They absorbed. They merged the bodies of their victims into themselves, creating twisted monsters that remembered nothing of who they once were. The screams of the consumed could still be heard from their fused forms. It was a fate worse than death. The war against the Hollow had lasted for generations. The coalition was losing. Slowly, steadily, world by world. That was why Command had made a desperate decision. They had invited the humans to join the fight. Telos did not understand this choice. Humans were new to the galaxy. They had only discovered faster than light travel 50 years ago. They were small, soft, and fragile. They had no natural weapons. No armor, no claws or fangs or venom. They could not see in the dark. They could not breathe underwater. They died from wounds that would barely slow a Varani soldier. What could such creatures possibly offer? But orders were orders. Telos arrived at Station Kira 7 to meet his new unit. The station floated in the darkness between stars, a massive structure of metal and light. Soldiers from a dozen species moved through its corridors. Varani, Torath, Makin, and now humans. Telos found them in Training Bay 12. There were 4 of them. Just 4. He had expected more. The first was a woman named Una Park. She was their leader, a lieutenant by human rank. She was small, barely reaching Telos's chest. Her hair was black and pulled back tight. Her eyes were dark and calm. When she saw Telos enter, she stood and saluted. Her movements were precise, professional. Telos noted that she showed no fear of him, even though he towered over her. The second was a man named Do-Yoon Kim. He was larger than the others, though still small by Varani standards. His shoulders were wide and his hands were rough. He carried a heavy weapon on his back, the kind meant for destroying vehicles. His face was quiet. He watched everything but said little. The third was a woman named Jisoo Han. She wore the markings of a field medic. Her smile came easily, which Telos found strange. They were preparing for war. What was there to smile about? She introduced herself with warmth in her voice, as if meeting an old friend instead of an alien commander. The fourth was barely more than a child. His name was Taiwan Lee. He was young, with nervous eyes that moved constantly. His hands fidgeted with his equipment. A scout, according to his file. New to combat. Telos wondered how long the boy would survive. "Commander Telos," Una said. Her voice was steady. "We are honored to serve under you." Telos studied them. These 4 soft creatures were supposed to help him fight the Hollow? He kept his doubts hidden. "We deploy in 3 days," he said. "Use the time to prepare." He watched them train over those 3 days. He watched them run drills and practice formations and test their weapons. They were competent enough, he supposed. Their tactics were sound. Their discipline was acceptable. But they were so fragile. So slow. So weak. What bothered him most was their behavior between drills. They laughed. They told jokes. They shared food from their home planet and argued about which meals were better. Taiwan showed pictures of his family to anyone who would look. Jisoo sang songs while cleaning her medical equipment. Do-Hyun and Una played some kind of game with cards that Telos did not understand. This was inefficient. This was wasteful. Before battle, soldiers should rest and focus. They should conserve energy and sharpen their minds. What were these humans doing instead? Acting like they were on vacation. On the second night, Telos found Una alone in the observation deck. She was staring out at the stars. He approached her, curious despite himself. "Your soldiers lack discipline," he said. Una did not turn around. "With respect, Commander, they have plenty of discipline. They waste time on frivolity, laughter, games, stories." Now she turned. Her dark eyes met his. "That is not wasted time. That is how we stay human. Telos did not understand. Explain. Yuna was quiet for a moment. Then she said, in 3 days, some of us might die. Maybe all of us. We know this. We accept this. She looked back at the stars. But if we spend our last days only thinking about death, then the Hollow has already won. They have taken our joy before taking our lives. Joy does not win battles. No, Yuna agreed. But it gives us something to fight for. We do not fight because we want to die, Commander. We fight because we want to live. We fight for the laughter and the games and the stories. We fight for the people we love. If we forget those things, we become empty. And empty soldiers are already dead. Telos considered her words. They seemed illogical, sentimental, and yet there was something in her voice that he could not dismiss. A certainty that went beyond tactics and probability. You are strange creatures, he said finally. Yuna smiled. It was a small smile, tired but genuine. So we have been told. 3 days later, they deployed to Vithus Prime, a mining colony. 50,000 colonists, all consumed by the hollow dot as the dropship descended through burning clouds. Telos looked at his soldiers. The Varani sat in perfect silence, their minds calculating, their hearts steady. The humans sat together, shoulder to shoulder. Taiwan's hands were shaking. Jisoo squeezed his arm and whispered something that made him laugh weakly. Telos watched them. These strange, soft, fragile creatures. He still did not understand them, but he was about to learn. I learned what real fear is the day I fought beside humanity, Part 2. First contact with the Hollow. The vivant what real fear is the day I fought beside humanity. Part 2. First contact with the Hollow. The drop went wrong from the start. Telos felt the ship shake as enemy fire hit them. Alarms screamed. Red lights flashed. The pilot shouted something about losing control. Then the world became chaos. The landing pods launched early, scattering across the sky like seeds in a storm. Telos was thrown against his restraints as his pod spun wildly. Through the small window, he saw other pods falling, some burning, some breaking apart. He saw the dark surface of Vithus Prime rushing up to meet him. The impact was brutal. His pod crashed through the roof of some building and slammed into the ground. For a moment, everything was darkness and pain. Then Telos forced his eyes open and checked his body, bruised, battered, but alive. He cut himself free from the restraints and kicked open the pod door. Dust and smoke filled the air. He was inside what had once been a storage building. Broken crates surrounded him. Through holes in the walls, he could see the ruins of the colony. Vithus Prime was dead. The buildings were covered in dark organic matter, like black veins spreading across the metal. The air smelled wrong, sweet and rotten like fruit left too long in the sun. And there was sound, a constant, distant hum. The Hollow were here. They were everywhere. Telos checked his communication device. Static. Most of his Varani soldiers were scattered across the colony. He could not reach them. He was alone. Then he heard footsteps. He raised his weapon, ready to fire. "Commander!" A voice called out. "Human. Commander Telos." It was Yuna. She emerged from the smoke, her rifle ready, her uniform torn, but her eyes sharp. Behind her came the others. Donghyun carrying his heavy weapon. Jisoo, her medical bag on her back. Taiwan, pale and shaking but still moving. They had found him. Somehow, in all this chaos, they had found him. "Are you injured?" Jisoo asked, already checking him for wounds. "I am functional," Telos said. "How did you locate me?" "We saw your pod fall," Yuna said. "We came." It was such a simple statement. They saw him fall. They came. As if it was the most obvious thing in the world. As if there was no other choice. Talos checked his equipment. His communication device was damaged, but his weapon worked. His armor was cracked but holding. He looked at the humans. 4 soft creatures in a dead colony filled with monsters. "We need to reach the primary objective," he said. "The hollow node. Can you fight?" Yuna nodded. "We can fight." They moved through the colony like ghosts. The streets were empty, but not silent. The hum was louder here. Sometimes they heard other sounds. What sounds? Scraping sounds. Once they heard screaming. It came from far away, then stopped suddenly. Taiwan was trembling. Talos noticed but said nothing. Fear was natural. Even Varani felt fear. The difference was what you did with it. They found the first hollow creature near a collapsed market building. Thought it had once been a colonist. Maybe several colonists. Now it was something else. A twisted mass of flesh and bone with too many arms and too many mouths. Its eyes, dozens of them, were empty but seeing. It moved toward them with horrible speed. Talos fired. His shots hit the creature, burning holes through its body. But it kept coming. The hollow did not feel pain. They did not stop unless you destroyed them completely. Dahin stepped forward. His heavy weapon roared. The blast hit the creature in what might have been its center and tore it apart. Pieces of it flew in all directions. Finally, it stopped moving. "Good shot," Yuna said quietly. They kept moving. More creatures came. Sometimes one, sometimes many. Each time, the humans fought beside Talos without hesitation. Their weapons were smaller than his, their bodies weaker. But they were precise. They were quick. They worked together like parts of the same machine. Talos began to notice things. When they moved through open ground, Dohyun always positioned himself to cover the others. He did not think about it. He simply did it. His body was a shield. When they passed wounded colonists already too far gone to save, Jesu still stopped to check them, still whispered apologies, still closed their eyes if they were dead. It slowed them down. It was inefficient. But she could not seem to help herself. When Taiwan's hands shook too badly to reload his weapon, Yuna did not scold him. She simply stood beside him, shoulder touching shoulder, until his breathing steadied. Then she nodded, and they continued. They fought for 3 hours. 3 hours of running, shooting, and bleeding. 3 hours of monsters and darkness and fear. Then they reached the tunnel system that led toward the hollow. No doubt the entrance was covered in organic matter. It looked like a mouth, waiting to swallow them. The hum was very loud now, vibrating in Telos's bones. "There will be more inside," he said. "Many more." "We know," Yuna said. Talos looked at her. At all of them. They were tired. They were hurt. Taiwan had a cut on his face that was still bleeding. Dohyun was limping from some injury he had not mentioned. Jisoo had used half her medical supplies already. They should rest. They should wait for reinforcements. Every tactical calculation said to fall back and regroup. "We should wait," Talos said. Yuna shook her head. "Every minute we wait, the hollow grows stronger. We go now. You could die. We could die waiting too." She checked her weapon. "At least this way, our deaths mean something." Talos did not understand. Varani valued survival. It was logical. A living soldier could fight another day. A dead soldier was nothing but memory. But these humans did not seem to think that way. They did not calculate their lives against future battles. They looked at what was in front of them and asked, "What can I do right now?" It was foolish. It was irrational, and somehow it was the bravest thing Talos had ever seen. "Very well," he said. "We go." They entered the tunnel together. The darkness swallowed them. The hum grew louder. Somewhere ahead, the hollow was waiting and Talos. For the first time in his long career, felt something he did not expect. He felt proud to fight beside these strange, soft, impossible creatures. He still did not understand them, but he was beginning to respect them. And that, perhaps, was the beginning of understanding. I learned what real fear is the day I fought beside humanity, Part 4. What fear really means. They survived the night. Barely when dawn came. The attacks stopped. The hollow pulled back, retreating into the darkness of the tunnels and the shadows of ruined buildings. Tellus did not know why. Perhaps they were regrouping. Perhaps they were waiting for something. It did not matter. The pause was a gift. 9 soldiers remained. 3 Varani. 4 humans. 2 others from different species who had found them during the night. 9 soldiers against a world of monsters. Extraction was still 4 hours away. But Yuna was not satisfied with waiting. "We finished the mission," she said. Tellus stared at her. "You want to assault the Hollow Node? Now, with 9 soldiers?" "Yes, that is madness." Yuna shook her head. "No, that is why we came here. We came to destroy the node. If we leave without doing that, everything we suffered was for nothing. Everyone who died, died for nothing." Tellus looked at his remaining Varani soldiers. They were silent, waiting for orders. They would follow him. They would retreat if he commanded. They would fight if he commanded. They did not question. They did not argue, but the humans were different. The humans had already made their choice. Taiwan was checking his rifle. His hands were steady now. The nervous boy from the dropship was gone. In his place was a soldier. A young soldier, yes. But a soldier. Jisu was treating wounds, her own included. She worked quickly, efficiently, saving supplies for what was to come. Dohyun sat against the wall, his chest wrapped in bandages. He should not have been able to move. But he was cleaning his weapon, preparing to fight. "Dohyun cannot go," Tellus said. "He will die." "Then I will die fighting," Dohyun said quietly. "Better than dying here. You could live. Extraction will come. You could..." "No." Dohyun's voice was firm. "I started this mission with my squad. I will finish it with my squad. One way or another." Tellus did not understand. Why throw your life away? Why refuse to survive? What drove these creatures to choose death over retreat? He asked Yuna directly. "Why? Help me understand. Why do you do this?" Yuna was quiet for a long moment. Then she sat down beside him, her rifle across her knees. "On our world," she said, "there is a saying. It goes something like this. The worst death is the one where you could have done more. Where you survived, but you ran. Where you lived, but you left others to die. All species fear death," Tellus said. "It is natural. It is logical. Yes, we fear death too." Yuna looked at her hands. They were covered in small cuts and burns. "But we fear something else more. We fear the morning after. We fear waking up and knowing that we chose ourselves over others. We fear living with the memory of our cowardice." She looked at him, and her eyes were very old. "I have seen soldiers survive battles they should not have survived. I have seen them live for decades after. But some of them never really came home. They left part of themselves on the battlefield. The part that could look in the mirror without shame." "You fear guilt more than death," Tellus said slowly. "Yes," Yuna nodded. "We fear guilt. We fear regret. We fear being the ones who walked away." She smiled, but it was a sad smile. "It is not logical. I know it is not logical. But it is who we are." Tellus thought about this. He thought about his 40 cycles of service. He thought about the soldiers he had lost, the battles he had won, the decisions he had made. He had always calculated, always measured lives against objectives. It was the Varani way. But had he ever felt what Yuna described? Had he ever feared living more than dying? He did not know. They moved toward the hollow node an hour later. 9 soldiers, moving through the dead colony like shadows. The tunnels were worse than before. The organic matter was thicker. The walls pulsed with horrible life. Sometimes they heard voices. Whispers from the consumed, speaking in languages they almost understood. Jisoo stopped by one of the fused colonists. It was a child, merged into the wall, still breathing but no longer alive. Her eyes were open. They moved, following Jisoo. "I am sorry," Jisoo whispered. She pressed her hand against the child's face. "I am so sorry." She raised her weapon. One shot. The breathing stopped. They kept moving. Telos watched the humans. Watched how they reacted to the horrors around them. The Varani soldiers were stone-faced, showing nothing. That was proper. That was disciplined. But the humans showed everything. Taiwan's jaw was tight with anger. Daoyin's eyes were wet, though he would never admit to tears. Jisoo whispered apologies to every victim they passed. They felt it. All of it. The pain. The horror. The rage. And they kept going anyway. They reached the node chamber 3 hours before extraction. It was vast. A cavern deep beneath the colony, filled with organic structures that pulsed and writhed. At the center was the node itself. A massive thing, like a heart made of darkness. Around it stood the Guardians. Creatures larger than any they had faced before. Talos calculated the odds. They were not acceptable. Not even close. "We should wait," he said. "Extraction is coming. We could return with more soldiers, more weapons. And how many more colonies die while we wait?" Yuna asked. "How many more children end up in those walls?" Telos had no answer. Yuna checked her rifle one last time. Then she looked at her squad. At Taiwan, young and scared, but ready. At Jisoo, kind and gentle, but fierce. At Diane, broken but unbeaten. "We did not come here to survive," she said. "We came here to win." She turned to Telos. "You can wait if you want. I will not judge you. But we are going." Telos looked at the node. At the monsters guarding it. At the impossible odds. Then he looked at the humans. And he made his choice. "No," he said. "I will not wait. I will fight beside you." Yuna smiled. It was a real smile this time. Warm and bright. "Then let us show them what we are made of." They charged. I learned what real fear is the day I fought. Beside Humanity, Part 5. The Cost of Victory. Battle for the node was the worst thing Telos had ever experienced. They charged into the chamber like a wave hitting rock. The Guardians met them with terrible force. One of the Varani soldiers died in the first 10 seconds, torn apart by claws the size of swords. Another fell moments later. The chamber filled with screams and gunfire and the horrible wet sounds of the hollow. Telos fought like he had never fought before. His forearms moved constantly, firing, striking, blocking. He killed creatures that should have killed him. He pushed forward when everything told him to fall back. But it was the humans who changed the battle. Dahin found a choke point. A narrow passage between 2 organic pillars that led to the node. He planted himself there, his heavy weapon raised, and he did not move. Creatures came for him. One after another. He killed them all. For 4 minutes. Do-hyun held that passage alone. 4 minutes of constant fire, constant pain, constant death. His weapon grew hot in his hands. His wounds reopened. Blood ran down his body in rivers. But he did not move. When the path was clear, he finally fell. Jisoo reached him seconds later, already working, already fighting to save him. But she knew, and he knew, and everyone knew. Did it work? Do-hyun whispered. Did I hold? You held, Jisoo said. Tears ran down her face. "You held, you stupid, brave man." Daoyun smiled. Then he closed his eyes. They pushed forward. 7 soldiers now. Then 6 when another Varani fell. Then 5. Taewon carried the demolition charge. The original carrier, a Varani engineer, had been killed in the first wave. Taiwan had picked up the explosive without thinking, without calculating. He just saw it needed to be done, and he did it. He was terrified. Telas could see it in his eyes, in the way his whole body shook. But he kept moving. He kept running toward the node, towards certain death, because the mission needed him. The largest guardian stood between them and the node. A creature of nightmares, 3 times the size of Telos, covered in absorbed bodies still screaming. It moved toward them with terrible speed. Yuna stepped forward. "Go," she said to Taiwan. "Get to the node. I will buy you time. Lieutenant, go." Taiwan ran. Jisoo and the remaining soldiers laid down covering fire. Telos fought beside them, cutting down smaller creatures that tried to follow. And Yuna faced the Guardian alone. She had no chance. Telos knew it. She knew it. Everyone knew it. Her rifle emptied in seconds. She threw it aside and drew her knife. A small blade against a mountain of horror. Thought she should have died. But she did not die. Not right away. She moved like water, like wind, like something beyond human. The Guardian struck at her and missed. Struck again and missed. She was everywhere and nowhere, cutting, stabbing, dancing between death. 30 seconds. That was all she needed to give. 30 seconds for Taiwan to reach the node, to plant the charge, to end this nightmare. 20 seconds. The Guardian caught her. One massive limb struck her side, sending her flying across the chamber. She hit the wall hard. Something broke. Telos heard it even over the chaos. 15 seconds. Yuna stood up. She should not have been able to stand. Her leg was bent wrong. Blood poured from her mouth. But she stood. She raised her knife. "Not yet," she whispered. "Not yet." She charged again. 10 seconds. The Guardian caught her again. This time, it did not let go. It lifted her from the ground, claws digging into her body. 5 seconds. Yuna looked at Taiwan. The young soldier had reached the node. He was planting the charge. His hands were steady now. No fear. No hesitation. Yuna smiled. "Now." She screamed. Taiwan pressed the trigger. The explosion was blinding. The node erupted in fire and light. The Guardian screamed, dropping Yuna as it burned. All around the chamber, the hollow creatures stopped moving, stopped living. The hive mind was broken. Telos reached Yuna first. She was alive, barely. Her body was broken in more places than he could count. But her eyes were open. She was smiling. "Did we win?" she asked. "Yes." Telos's voice was strange to his own ears, thick with something he did not recognize. "You won. Good." Yuna closed her eyes. "That is good." Extraction arrived 2 hours later. They found 12 survivors. 4 humans. 8 Varani. Everyone else was dead. Do-yoon had died in the chamber, his body still blocking the passage. Jisoo had carried Yuna through the tunnels, refusing to leave her behind. Taiwan had not spoken since the explosion. He just stared at nothing, the weight of what he had done settling into his bones. In the years that followed, Telos wrote many reports about Vithos Prime. He described the tactics, the losses, the victory. He recommended commendations for the humans. He suggested that more human soldiers be integrated into coalition forces. But his personal log said something different. "I have served the coalition for 40 cycles," he wrote. "I believed I understood war. I believed I understood courage. Today I fought beside humanity, and I learned that I understood nothing. We Varani fear death. It is logical, sensible. It keeps us alive. Humans fear something else entirely. They fear being the ones who walked away. They fear looking in the mirror and seeing someone who chose survival over sacrifice. I watched a human private, barely more than a child by their standards, run towards certain death because he could not bear to be the one who did not. I watched a medic cry over enemies and friends alike. I watched a wounded man hold a passage with his dying breath. I watched a woman charge a monster with nothing but a knife and a smile. This is what makes humanity dangerous. This is what makes them invaluable. And this is what makes them the most frightening species I have ever encountered. Because you can negotiate with an enemy who fears death. But what do you do with an enemy who fears cowardice more? Many years later, a young Varani cadet asked Telos about humans. The cadet had heard stories. He wanted to know if they were true. Telos thought for a long moment before answering. Humans are small, he said. They are soft. They are fragile. In any fair test of strength or speed or endurance, they would lose to most species in the galaxy. Then why are they so valued? The cadet asked. Telos remembered Yuna charging the Guardian, Do-Yun holding the line, Taiwan running toward death with steady hands, Jizu crying and fighting and saving lives. Because when the universe sends its worst against you, you want soldiers beside you who refuse to calculate acceptable losses. You want soldiers who will burn themselves to ash rather than abandon a single comrade. The cadet asked if that was truly so frightening. Telos closed his eyes. He was old now. He had seen more battles, more death, more victory and defeat. But he still remembered Vithos Prime like it was yesterday. Yes, he said quietly. It is, because I have seen many species face extinction. Most accept it. They calculate. They retreat. They surrender. He opened his eyes. Humans do not accept extinction. Humans do not calculate or retreat or surrender. When you push humans into a corner, when you threaten everything they love, they do not give up. He paused. They get angry. The cadet was silent. And there is nothing in this galaxy, Telos said, more terrifying than an angry human who has nothing left to lose. He looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, humans were fighting, laughing, loving, living, being impossibly, beautifully, terrifyingly human. Nothing at all,